Welcome back to My Brainwise Coach. But I'd like to transition next, Cheryl, to one of the things that you've shared is there's personal coaching, executive coaching, but then there's also some work that can be done with teams. And I think this can be both from the team in the context of business, right? And how that work can be done. But then I would encourage our Brainwise friends to think about it that from that perspective, especially if you're a manager or you're on a team, but then also how can you use that at home? Because there's a lot of parallels in teamwork and work at home.
Yeah, absolutely. So part of what Define Consulting does is we work with organizations, go inside organizations, and we work to help leaders grow. And so we will often come in and help create curriculum for leadership development programs. It could be from frontline, new emerging leaders, all the way, as I mentioned, the high potential leaders to executive teams and offsite and strategy and becoming more aligned as an executive team. So when we talk about awareness, I'll just think right now I'm working with a fabulous organization and for a couple of years now and working at different team levels. So working at the emerging leader, frontline team leader team level, working with a mid-level team level, and started out working at the executive team level. But I believe your question was around how do we help these teams become more self-aware? Is that right?
Yeah, how do we help these teams become more self-aware, or how do we help them
Yeah.
become more effective in being a team?
So regardless of what level the team or the leadership team is, it's understanding. I'm going to go back to self-aware. So we do some work early in the curriculum about understanding the brain. Now, depending on the level leader, depends on how deep we're going to go. This isn't a clinical sort of thing, but it's having to understand, and they get it and they love it because if you can help these, I'll just say new leaders right now, understand that the brain's number one function is for safety. And so, what's going on within them. And then you always want to have the applicability to how this is in the workplace, what might trigger threat in themselves, what sorts of things. And then you start helping those leaders understand then how do they impact that either safety within others, right? The psychological safety or fear and threat. There's a lot of work done. And I always introduce emotional intelligence. Phil mentioned it earlier, and I have found it doesn't matter. These first time frontline leaders, they get it, they love it. They come back and they say, this has helped me at home. I have a group, it's their second year coming back for another level of learning. And one gentleman said to me, he goes, my wife is so happy that I'm coming back for round 2 of this curriculum because he has become more self-aware and understanding what's going on. And we do a lot around communication and effective communication and creating alignment and all those sorts of things. So I'm not sure if I've gone off track here maybe a little bit in what you originally asked me, but
It's perfect. I think it's perfect because one is, as a leader in a team, we have to be aware of how we're showing up so that we can then have a better outcome and team involvement. And then there's other team effectiveness types of activities that can be done to help improve it. But it always starts with ourselves. And I think as we think about it, as you were just describing for the at home part where the gentleman, he's showing up better at home and his wife wants him to come back for part 2, I would encourage our Brainwise friends to think about it from your perspective at home. You've heard us talk about emotional intelligence, mental models. You've heard us talk about communication. How am I showing up at home? What am I doing that's serving my relationship and my family well? And then where are there things that I maybe have some opportunity for continued improvement? Because there are so many parallels between how we show up and what we do with teams at work to then the same thing at home. It becomes just different topics of conversation a lot of times, but there is a lot of parallels.
And a lot of times I mentioned assessments earlier with all these different data points, whether I'm a fan of strength finders. I've already mentioned the PTP, emotional intelligence, something as easy as emotional intelligence 2.0, which is a great program. The Thomas Kilmann instrument on conflict styles is one. And I've had leaders go through these different workshops or sessions through our different programs and then say, oh, I want to have and they've taken it home and had family members with their kids even take strength finders or their wives, or they'll take the results and say, and they'll have these really wonderful discussions with their significant others and their families about that. And then communication models that we teach, influencing models, creating alignment, all of those sorts of things. I would say what I learned here, I can take everywhere. And that's a philosophy that we have, especially when you're talking about these really life-changing skills inside intact teams and organizations or inside your own team within your home or community.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things we talked about, Cheryl, early on is that one of the probably attributes or characteristics that you've helped individual leaders and even teams to some extent, but from the leader perspective, grow is within confidence and executive presence or leadership presence. So can you tell us a little bit about that? Why does confidence seem to be a recurring theme oftentimes? And then how do you help them to be able to improve it?
So interesting because I can go back 20, 30 years and it still keeps coming up this term executive presence, gravitas, confidence, whatever it is. And what we know is that all things equal, skill, everything else, it is those leaders who are able to show up in a way that exudes confidence, this presence, which is elusive, right? Really, when you look at describing it, those leaders tend to get promoted over those who do not have that skill. I believe it can be learned. Some say fake it till you make it. I've worked with several individuals and they'll say, I need to develop more confidence. I don't feel confident. When somebody doesn't believe they are confident, they are going to show up in a way that others go, she's not showing up very confidently. And that's going to be through our body language, the way we're able to get the message out, articulate a message, all those sorts of things that we know. So the work to be done with an individual is let's get to the core of what's your belief system. What is it that is creating this lack of confidence within you? So that's there. The other thing is to do work. I do a lot of work in helping leaders with their executive presence. And that is really teaching. It really is skills. What are your presentation and facilitation skills? What are they? The ones that are very impactful. And then it's teaching those skills, practicing. We use video, it's played back, there's feedback, but it is phenomenal. Even in a 2-day or a day and a half, you can take a baseline of where somebody is when they first walk in to where they walk out. And it is phenomenal if certain techniques are used. So there's skills, even if somebody doesn't feel confident inside still for whatever reason, because we're not doing mental models work during those exercises, I can still practice pausing, eye contact, and things like that. That whatever it's triggering, Phil, you'll have to name it for me. In others, wow, she must be really sure of herself. But I could be sitting here right now not sure of myself at all.
Yeah. And I was going to ask you, Phil, from a neuroscience perspective, how do we help our brainwise friends after what we just heard from Cheryl around building confidence and executive presence? What are some takeaways that we can give them from a brainwise lens?
So a couple of things. One, you mentioned pausing. And yet many people have a mental model that says, if I pause, someone's going to jump in. Or if I pause, it indicates I don't know what I'm doing. And yet the power of that pause is incredible. But our brains want to fill it up. One of my heroes, Winston Churchill, knew that the pauses in a speech were just as important as the words he said. We've got a mental model where we want to fill things up, especially if we're under pressure or stress, because we tend to not have that prefrontal cortex coming to control what's going on, and we revert to old behaviors. So part of what you're talking about is for that person that wants to demonstrate more confidence, and you build in a process by which they can do it. Now, how do you get it to be a habit for them? That takes us straight into creating new habits.
Right.
And I can go on for another 2 hours if you want, but that's not what we're about.
Maybe not. Maybe we'll come back and we'll do an episode on the neuroscience of confidence or something, because I think it does continue to be an interesting conversation. It shows up in a lot of places. And Cheryl, you and I have worked with many leaders together within an organization, and it was something that showed up all the time. That confidence was the thing that people needed to build, that they were struggling with. And then when they found it and they found their voice, the effort or the results on the other side were just incredible, both at home and at work. They began to see just a different paradigm shift because they were showing up in a more confident way, not arrogance, because a lot of times you can mask your lack of confidence as masked as arrogance, but truly believing in yourself. And sometimes that is also being able to say, I don't know, and being confident and being able to say that and not feeling like people are going to look at you like you're not intelligent because you don't know something. But
And
I think, Phil, I see a brain spark coming off. I'm going to start calling them your brainwise sparks.
my brainwise sparks. I'm not sure they're always wise, but they are sparks.
Don't start a fire or anything like that.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
A couple of things. One, we've got to be a little bit careful because sometimes confidence and competence need to go hand in hand.
Yes.
And so if you become too confident and you don't grow your competence at the same time, that's when you end up in the derailing situation that you were talking about earlier on.
I love that you say that. May I add a third C? Comfort, competence, and confidence. And I think with competence, then comes comfort, then comes confidence. And so we'll just take the workshop I mentioned on building your facilitation presentation skills. Let's teach the skills and help you become competent, right? You become more comfortable through practice. And then you see the confidence coming more naturally because I've approached it this way. And you're exactly right. You can overcompensate and it comes off as arrogance, or people see right through it because you might be sending a message, but there's not any meat to that message or whatever it is. So, yeah, I love that.
Do you think is a great segue into the wrap up question, which is what excites you, Cheryl, about the coaching field and ultimately being able to continue giving back to those that are coming up into the workforce?
Yeah, thank you. What excites me most is working with Phil, you, Cole, the brainwise side of things, really ensuring that in the coaching field that there is a neuroscience approach to how coaching is taking place. And we're always learning new things, right? Phil, our researcher, is always sharing, but really helping people understand what's going on in self. There's a science side to this. I think it helps ground people on the coaching side and helps them really accelerates the work that can be done when going through coaching or as coaches as we're coaching. The other thing that excites me, and I don't quite know where it's going quite yet, but there needs to be something around this, is our younger generations, not to call out certain generations, but those who are new in the workforce, maybe struggling to find jobs, struggling to be successful in the workforce, and then those who will be entering the workforce. I don't know the answer to this, but I'm going to work on it, right? You guys will help me. Is what can we do to help prepare these individuals for success in whatever that work environment's going to look like? And that's a whole nother conversation for another day, is what work environment, the ever-changing work environment. But young people are struggling. Some are, but I think there's work to be done there.
For sure.
I actually think that's probably a really good topic for us to pick up in sometime in the future. Maybe we invite you back and we have a couple of other people will have a panel on what's going on and what we can do about it.
I would love that.
Wonderful. One of the things we always do, Cheryl, at the end of our sessions is we talk about some reflection. And then usually I am the one that gives most of the questions. Phil's joked I've always had 100. He always adds a few too. So it's not just me. But if you could summarize in your own words what we've talked about today, and then maybe give our Brainwise friends 3 questions that they can use to reflect on personally what they've heard in the episode today that might be able to help them as they go along their life's journey.
Sure. So the first thing that comes to mind is ask yourself, be honest with yourself, allow yourself to hear the answer from within. What is working for me in my life and what is not working for me in my life? Whether that is at home, at work, or both. The second one that comes to mind is what feedback have I received that I perhaps am not acting upon? Or if I have not received feedback, who should I go ask for some feedback on how I am showing up? And the third is, I always say this, identify, define consulting, right? Become very clear on who you want to be, what legacy you want to leave, your personal professional brand. What do you want people to say and believe about you? And then ask yourself, am I showing up in a way that would create those beliefs? So those are my three.
I love it. It's perfect. It's a great way to summarize.
Perfect.
Yeah. And our brainwise friends are probably going, wait a minute, they didn't do their brain wise or brain unwise moment from the week early on in our episode today. So we're going to truncate at the end this time. We're going to switch it up a little bit. So I'll kick us off, and I'll give Phil and Cheryl the opportunity to think about your brain wise or your brain unwise moment from the week. I would say mine this past week was yesterday. One of the things that has our brainwise friends know is I'm in the midst of a fairly big professional transition, coming out of an organization for a long period of time, still supporting in the final stages. But yesterday there was a kind of a point of finality, knowing, okay, this is when the date's going to be, this is when my transition work is going to be complete. And there were several emotions, several things that came up. One, okay, great, now I know when the final part is going to be. But then also there was this kind of emotional moment of grief to say, there's something I'm also losing. Even though I've known about it for a number of months now, it became more clear and more evident that this is when it's going to happen. And so my brainwise moment is I allowed myself to take the moment to have a moment of grief or to feel whatever I needed to feel, but not allow myself to live in that space. So then I got up and I decided to go ahead and do a little bit of baking. I didn't eat it all though, so that's a good moment too. I could add that in there. But I did something productive with the time. So that way I was focused on something positive. So I gave myself the moment to grieve. I then transitioned to something positive, and then it ultimately helped me to have a much more productive and pleasant experience throughout the rest of the day. So that was mine. Cheryl, you want to go next? Or Phil? Who wants to go first?
I'll share so for me this week, it's been focus on self, which is often in coaching, right? It's helped the coachee is not focusing or taking care of self. But I am very consciously and purposefully focusing on my health, my sleep, what time I'm going to bed, what I'm doing before I go to bed, what I'm putting in my body. Because I know as a coach that you have to take care of yourself before you can take care of others. But that doesn't mean we always do that. And what I'm experiencing is even in a very short amount of time with mindfulness and intentionality, you can shift with the right sleep, the right nutrition. So that's my brainwise moment, is to practice what one preaches.
I love it. Very good. Phil?
I'm actually going to talk about two. And one is we never know the impact we have on others. And so this was something that dawned on me yesterday, but actually occurred a week ago. I won't go into all the details, but I was at a situation where I saw somebody that I hadn't seen for about 3 or 4 months. And I walked up and said, I'll call him Bob. So that's not his name, but that's what I'll call him. So I went up to Bob and I said, how are you? And we had a brief 5-minute conversation. And then I had to run. I had to go to a meeting. Forward to yesterday when I was at another meeting, and the two people I was meeting with related how much that 5 minutes that I spent with this gentleman had meant to him. And so just, hey, take an extra couple of minutes and go and say hi to that person that you haven't spoken to for a while. You don't know the level of impact that you are actually having. So that was one of my moments. The other one was first thing this morning. Our observers may have noticed that I tend to wear button-down shirts most of the time. I'm now 75 years old, and I'm starting to get a little bit of arthritis. And buttoning these shirts now is way more difficult. Mm-hmm. And so I was thinking about it, and I went, wait a minute. Here's a habit. Because what it comes from is growing up. This is a mental model. Growing up, my first probably 15 years in the workplace was to wear a tie. And in order to have a tie effectively, you have to put it around your neck and then button this down. But I don't have to wear it anymore as I button it down. I can do it when it's lying in front of me. And so that was a sort of practical habit that I just shot in the head this morning.
Or you could start wearing shirts with collars that aren't buttoned down.
Could do that.
Or the
too.
snap buttons, the ones that snap versus you have to put through the hole.
But there's lots of ways of reframing this.
Right. Yes, and I would say you're 75 years young. That's
Okay.
what I would say.
I appreciate
You look
that.
fabulous, Phil. Both of you do. You've been such great mentors and leaders in my life. So I just want to say thank you, Cheryl, for joining us on our podcast today. I know our Brainwise friends are going to have a tremendous amount of takeaways as they listen today, both personally and professionally, based off of your experience, the work that you do. And if anyone wanted to get into contact with you, how would they go about doing so?
Yeah, thank you. Cheryl, Cheryl, at defineconsulting.com. DEFINE consulting.com. Awesome. Thank you so much,
Wonderful.
Phil.
Yeah,
Well,
you're
very
thanks
welcome.
for joining.
And thank you for the contribution. I know we did a little bit of practice beforehand, but went in all sorts of directions that we could never have predicted.
No,
Thanks.
it was great. Thanks for joining. And Brainwise friends, thanks for joining us today on another episode of My Brainwise Coach, where we really talked about the intersection of neuroscience, coaching, and personal development. So stay tuned as we continue our journey of understanding ourselves through a neuroscience lens. And if you enjoyed our podcast, comment, subscribe, and share this with those in your circle so they too can begin to live in a more brainwise fashion. As always, stay compassionate, stay curious, and stay brainwise.